Focus. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video, which I promise will be the last in the Don't Spend Too Much Money series, as I'm conscious that, well, they can be a bit sensible and boring telling people who like to spend money on things not to spend money on these things. Yep, if you're anything like me, most guitarists enjoy buying shiny things, and the acquisition of said shiny things is, well, it's part of the fun. But continuing in the spirit of being sensible, let's talk about the biggest mistake I see beginner guitarists make. And I'm not going to talk about actual practical guitar playing here, so if that's what you've come for, then you may be disappointed. But there's loads of those videos already doing the rounds, and I'm not going to try and add anything to them. But I've yet to see this point being made, and that is too many guitarists have a guitar budget and not a wider guitarist budget. Now, I appreciate that statement might sound unclear, so what I mean by that is many new guitarists ask whether they need a Les Paul 60s standard or a vintage American-made Tele or a PRS limited edition to develop their sound and progress into the proper league. It's the belief that if only I had that guitar, then I'd be a better guitarist. And while saving your money and having your heart set on a specific dream guitar isn't a bad thing, and who am I to tell you how much money you should be spending on a guitar? That's none of my business and is a purely personal thing. But where I can chip in is on this point. Many of us blow the budget on the guitar without leaving any change for development. So here's my suggestion. Have a guitar budget that sits within a wider guitarist budget. Now, that could be an ongoing thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be one lump sum that you've saved up for. This could be an allocation of funds on a yearly basis. But it includes investing in some of the areas we're going to talk about today, namely three areas: education, inspiration, and experience. Now, I believe allocating a proportion of your budget towards education can be highly beneficial. Now, this could be your traditional guitar lesson, actually physically going to someone's house or having someone come to your house or going to a studio and paying somebody cash in exchange for their time teaching you or developing your guitar skills. So that's the classic model and arguably the best one-on-one time for you to develop, but also quite expensive. But if budget and time and flexibility are of concern to you, well, then we've never lived in an era where education is so readily available. It's never been so easy to do online or remote learning. Now, I'm not talking just about YouTube, what we're doing here, but I'm talking about actual courses that have been designed and curated with your development in mind. Now, this could still be an actual face-to-face, someone's time for your money model, but just virtual, delivered over Zoom calls. But for the more budget conscious, you can also download or gain access to pre-recorded video courses where you're not paying for someone's physical time. They've already created the course. You log on any time of the day, anywhere in the world, whenever suits, and you can follow that course from start to finish. Now, investing in education and development should be at any stage in your guitar journey, whether just starting out or whether you've been playing for years. Many people, for some reason in music, believe that music and the ability to play an instrument should be a natural talent, and paying for lessons just isn't very rock and roll. Now, I personally, as a naive teenager, thought like this. There was definitely a belief in the circles of musical friends that I hung out with that music was a natural talent and you just had to be good at it. You had to figure out yourself, and there was no need to pay for lessons because that's just something that untalented people do. Now, how utterly stupid was that? Firstly, it's just not true. The likelihood is most professional musicians have some form of coaching to hone their craft. Certainly within singing. If you're a professional singer, you should have a coach. You should be investing in the development and the maintenance of your voice. But even in the guitar world, where perhaps guitar coaching isn't yet a thing, if you've been inside a studio, if you've ever paid for studio time where you've had a producer that knows what they're doing, the likelihood is that producer will have given you some ideas. Perhaps play that guitar riff up an octave or down here on the fret, or perhaps don't play anything at this point. Most guitarists or professional musicians that you can think of will have had some input outside of just themselves that's helped shape the tone and sound that you've come to know of them. And there's also just wanting to be more equipped. Now, maybe this is because I've got young kids and can't leave the house without a change of clothes, cowpole, sun cream. But I want to be prepared. I want to be the Swiss Army knife of guitar players. And if investing in education helps me to be more equipped, then that should form part of my guitarist development strategy. And then the more obvious points, lessons can help beginner musicians establish strong foundations, learn proper techniques, maybe even some music theory. And it can also open up various genres and styles. Now, perhaps when you first get into playing guitar, there's one particular genre that you like, and that's where you're going to stick at. If you develop and you start to join bands, you start to meet other musicians, and those musical styles might start to stretch and open up a little bit, and you may find yourself wishing you could play some other genres. Especially if you've got any ambitions of playing professionally, where being versatile can be a really helpful thing. So secondly, inspiration. Attending live shows and performances is another really important part of a guitarist development, and I think something that should be factored into any guitarist development budget. So aside from live music exposing guitarists to different playing styles, stage presence and the energy of a live performance, it really is just hard to beat that feeling of live music. It just can't be replicated by listening to Spotify playlists or watching music videos on YouTube. Now, I think most of you watching this probably would have been to a live performance at some point and will know what I'm talking about here. Feeling the bass pump through your chest and the energy you'll experience in the room, and watching music being created by 4 people on a stage will do more for your inspiration and motivation than watching any music video. I think by observing guitarists in action, you'll gain inspiration, but you'll spot techniques and you'll broaden your music horizons. But on top of that, attending concerts and gigs gives you the opportunity to connect with other musicians. Now, I'm talking here more about small gigs, not a Foo Fighters concert. You're unlikely to find your next drummer at Wembley Stadium. But in these smaller venues where you'll likely be brushing shoulders with other musicians, there may be potential opportunities to collaborate or even just foster a sense of community with like-minded people. So number 3, experience. And really, I just mean physical meetups. Now, physical meetups don't necessarily need to cost anything. I'm essentially talking here about old school, pre-digital jamming with other people. But unless you're lucky enough to have like-minded musicians on your doorstep, then train travel and potential hotel fees could be worth factoring into your budget. So for my own personal example, I work a lot in music licensing or sync licensing, which if you're not sure what that is, I did do another video explaining that, which I'll try and link here. But it's quite a lonely composer-producer world where I compose and record all my songs on my own, in my shed, don't often get to meet other people. Now, I've been fortunate to have been invited to a couple of sync composer meetups and parties, and it's just so good for the soul to meet up with other people that are like me, that also work on their own in isolation and have the same goals as me and the same creative processes, but also some of them have different creative processes. Some of them produce different types of music and go about it in a completely different way. And just spending time with other like-minded people, I was able to learn a few tips and tricks just from talking to them over a beer, and I'd come home from those meetups fired up and ready to compose and create more music. But more broadly, jamming with other musicians or going to guitar workshops, maybe going to larger conferences, are going to present opportunities for you to grow, essentially just seeing how other people do it. I think it's really great if you can hook up with players that are more experienced than you. Now, this might seem intimidating at first and is ripe for imposter syndrome, but if you can spend time with people that are more experienced and better than you, copying them allows you to step up and attempt to keep up with them. But one of the best things I think you can do is join a band. I really do think this is the best bang for buck in your development. It'll teach you to play in time. It'll help you understand how other instruments interact, not just guitar and guitar parts, but drums, bass, piano, flute, banjo, whatever kind of music you're into. Understanding how a song comes together and how each individual instrument or element plays a part can be so useful in your development as a musician. It can also help the wider creative process. Now, you may not have any interest in writing songs, no interest in being a songwriter, but just jamming with other musicians and starting to come up with riff ideas and solo ideas or chord progressions really goes a long way in motivating you to want to keep playing and to turn up again and again. There's also no feeling like creating music. I remember my first ever proper band practice. I was probably 15, maybe 16, and me and 3 mates were in my bedroom at my mum and dad's house. And it's the first time we'd ever played as 4 of us. I can't remember what song we played, and no doubt it sounded horrendous, but to us, it was magical. a song that we would only have heard on a CD or on a YouTube wasn't even a thing back then, so it would have been MTV music videos. We just recreated it with 4 instruments and a set of vocal cords. It's one of the best feelings ever, and you just want to keep doing it. You want to develop, you want to progress so that you can come back week in, week out and have that feeling again and again, only bigger and better. So if you can, join a band. So I guess in conclusion, yes, buy a nice guitar if you can afford one. It really is a lovely feeling getting home from a guitar store and opening up the case of a shiny new axe that you've been dreaming of for years. And yes, buy the accessories, the foot pedals, the amp modelers, the recording kit. These are all good fun and can no doubt inspire us to want to play. But my advice, for what it's worth, would be to hold back some cash in the piggy bank or allocate a yearly budget, whatever works, for those 3 areas of musical development: education, inspiration, experience. I hope you agree, and I hope this advice works for you. Actually, regardless of your ability, whether you're a beginner player or a years down the line, I think the saying continues to ring true. We're never too good that we can no longer be educated, inspired, experienced. Have experience. Educated, inspired, expired. No, not expired. You get what I mean. Give us a like and a cheeky subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. I think I'm done.